Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Optimizing Your Success. I am Dr. Ruth Gotian, and I am here with all of my Mentor Project friends, starting with Dr. Debbie Heiser, who is the co-founder and CEO of the Mentor Project, who is always behind the scenes making us look fantastic. And of course, we have Janice Lintz, who is the #1 change maker with a special passion for helping the millions of people worldwide with hearing loss. And Susie Katz, who is an award-winning photographer and founder of the nonprofit Photo Wings. And Dr. Bruce Wiley, a writer, a journalist, a professor, a systems modeler, and a computational digital health expert, an avocado lover. And Dr. Michelle Johnston, my good friend, Michelle, who is the chair of business at Loyola in New Orleans. And Michelle and I know each other from 100 Coaches. And maybe we'll tell people later how we actually met, because that's actually a good story, Michelle, I think. But Michelle, why don't you, I always forget to tell people what I do. I study extreme high achievers. So I surround myself with people who are on this show all the time to figure out how they became successful and how you can too. And I'm always excited to share my friends with everyone here. With that said, Michelle, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I think we should begin with the story of how we met, to be honest with you. It's pretty awesome.
Well, do you want my version or your version?
Okay, so here's my version. So Ruth and I are in 100 Coaches together, a Marshall Goldsmith group, and every Monday morning we're with people from around the world, like-minded people, executive coaches, executive CEOs, consultants, and Marshall will give the topic of the day, and then we'll get into breakout groups and discuss how we can best support our clients, how we best can support ourselves. So Ruth and I ended up in a breakout group the first time we met each other, and I'm literally running through campus. It wasn't during lockdown, but it was, most people were in lockdown, and Loyola is small enough that I was allowed to teach in person in this huge auditorium, but only 7 students could attend class and the rest had to be online. So I'm up on stage in this huge auditorium lecturing to 7 students, and the rest, you know how that was, on Zoom from all over the world. But so I'm racing to teach, and I've got my mask on and I'm going through campus, and I said, "But Ruth, I just wanted to hang out with you. Like, I want to be friends. I don't want to miss this opportunity." And Ruth immediately said, "I love you. We're going to be friends." Because everything was just so crazy, you know?
It was definitely early in the pandemic, and then we connected afterwards, but the reason that I really connect with Michelle so much is because she keeps me in check, and she keeps me in line to make sure that I don't take on too much, and she checks in with me on a regular basis. So, when I tell you she's the real deal, Michelle is the real deal.
Wow.
Now, we gave everyone all this background, but we didn't tell them about you, Michelle. Why don't you tell them your story?
My story. So, to be honest with you, my story is one of fitting in. And that ends up to be why I wrote this book, The Seismic Shift in Leadership: How to Thrive in This New Era of Connection. I was a corporate brat, and so we moved with General Motors. My father was a lifelong, still dedicated. I mean, it's very hard not to buy a General Motors car still to this day. He's so loyal to that company. And so we moved around every 2 years. And I became really, really good at fitting in. And I always looked at the next move as an adventure and new friends and new cities. And I didn't really think much about it until I became a professional. And I was 28 years old, hired as a professor, visiting professor originally in the College of Business at Loyola. And like a lot of people on your show, high achievers, type A, goal oriented, I wanted to succeed. And I was so used to just fitting in, figuring it out, that I looked around the College of Business and figured out which faculty members were successful, very similar to what you do, Ruth. Figured out which faculty members were successful, formed a little team of mentors. And my job, my role, I thought, was to emulate them. So I spent years in the classroom trying to be everything that innately was not me. So most people in the College of Business when I was 28 at the time, because I've been there for 22 years, they didn't look like me, didn't act like me. And it never occurred to me that this would be successful in the College of Business classroom. And so I just tried to be like them. And it shouldn't surprise all of you all that being inauthentic doesn't get you anywhere or any place good. So I received poor faculty evaluations and I couldn't understand why, because I was doing exactly what they were doing and they were winning faculty of the year, right? And it wasn't till this big eureka happened, because at the same time, of course, as I'm a professor, I'm an executive coach. And I'm so fortunate. I currently coach 15 primarily CEOs, mostly in the health administration field. And this was a number of years ago. I was coaching, and three of my executives ended up losing their jobs. And they were all in different positions at different companies. And I went back to the data book, and because I've been mentored and trained by Marshall Goldsmith, it's all about feed for forward. So we begin with a 360 process, and I end up with this rich qualitative data. So when it happened, first I had to look in the mirror and say, how in the world could I have helped them more? But then I went back to the data, because we're trained researchers, right? You go back to the data. And what jumped off the page, which didn't jump off the page originally, was that their people found each of these leaders to be inauthentic.
Wow.
And they couldn't trust the leader. And so when I looked long and hard in the mirror and spent a lot of time reflecting, how could I be a better coach? I realized I wasn't the best coach I could have been to them at that point in my life, because I was being inauthentic.
Whoa. Aha moment.
Huge. And that's when I knew I was going to write a book.
Wow. So when did you start this process of writing the Seismic Shift in Leadership?
Yeah, a while ago, because I knew at that big when the lightning struck, because it was never my goal to be an author. It literally was a moment where I thought I almost failed, because what I did then was I realized I had to have the courage, and I felt it was a huge risk for me. I was so used to just fitting in that it was a huge risk to go into the classroom and just be me. And I did it. And then once I did it and didn't make apologies for being a little bit too excited at 8 a.m. in the morning, right? And doing all the experiential adult learning, which I knew to do, rather than I had been told to lecture on hours at end and kick
Yeah.
people out, and just a real authoritarian style is what I was being mentored in. And I'm a nurturer and I want to support you, and I'll serve as your coach. And I reframed the whole professorial experience really to kind of capitalize on my strengths. And then I won faculty member of the year, right? But that took a lot of courage to get there. And then once I realized, okay, I figured it out. I need to help leaders figure it out. But most importantly, I need to put it in a book to really help a lot more people.
So you went from fitting in to standing out just by being yourself.
Yeah. Well said.
Wow.
Scary,
Wow.
right? Because I was so used to living under the radar. When your whole life you're trying to fit in, you're never trying to stand out, right? You kind of live
Wow.
below the radar.
Wow. Janice, this is like your story, isn't it?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think being authentic, it just works. It's just first off, it's a lot less stressful.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, my daughter went to a very conservative private school, like back in the day, twin sets and pearls,
Oh, wow.
right? Oh yeah, it's where Jackie Kennedy went to school, so it was twin sets and pearls. It really wasn't me. And, I was always like very uncomfortable in the school. But you know what? When I left, I remember one time when an article in the New York Times came out and they called me a pushy mom who gets things done. And a woman said, "Oh, they really captured you." I was like, what? Because you weren't allowed to stand out. Like you were meant to blend. It was a very high profile school and you were meant to blend in. And when she left, and it was freedom. It was like suddenly I didn't have to worry about fitting into this. I was like a square peg in a round hole. And it's just much more relaxing to just be yourself. And then that's actually when I started excelling.
Happens
Janice,
over and
you and
over
I
again, doesn't it?
Yeah, Janice, you and I need to be friends for sure, because
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, you should have
without a
seen me in the twins. You could see me in the photos in the twin sets and pearls. I look so stiff. The hair flipped. It's just so funny.
I did the same thing at Auburn University. I was a Kappa Delta, a KD lady, and we had to wear our pearls and twin sets.
Okay, so she was at
those-
Chapin. She was at Chapin, a girls' school in New York. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm the girl who wore pearls by choice, but we're not going to go there. So Bruce, how about you? You wore pearls?
No, I have not worn pearls yet, but I'm working on it.
All right. Now, Michelle, you found that the book really centers on The Seismic Shift of Leadership really focuses on connection. And you found that in order to be successful, leaders actually have to do 3 things, right? At 3 different levels. Why don't you take a deep dive into that? Teach us more about that.
Yeah, so the
Put
seismic
your professorial hat on.
That's right. The seismic shift in leadership, we've all been feeling it. And if you haven't felt it, you've been living under a rock, right? And it's
Wow.
not just from the pandemic. And what I realized is that me, like the leaders I had been coaching who lost their jobs, we had all been mentored by the old command and control style of leadership.
Yep.
And whether it was effective or not, that could be a whole nother podcast of whether that ever was effective. But I can tell you right now, it is no longer effective.
That's right.
And it's really dying out. And so the seismic shift is one of, I really think we're in a people revolution. We're in a human revolution. And so I just frame it as connection, because what I realized, those leaders who were not effectively connecting with their teams because their teams didn't trust them, because they're like, who are you? You're not genuine. You can't effectively lead unless you connect with yourself.
That's right.
So that those 3 levels, the foundation is connection with yourself, getting comfortable in your own skin, having the courage to be you and not put that mask of perfection and try to be your mentor, your former boss, or what you think in your head this position is supposed to look like, act like, and sound like. Once you have that foundation, then all of a sudden the leaders who are successful connect beautifully with their teams. And then you get to that top level, which is really where you are catapulted to the C-suite, is when you have that true connection with the organization, true alignment, values alignment, strategic vision alignment.
So it's yourself, others, organization.
Boom.
Love it. Okay, Bruce. You trained under the leader do as I say, right? Era?
Oh, yeah, I guess in medicine, which I was, originally trained. I did other things after
You
medicine.
did lots of other things after.
But I remember doing my training. Someone, one of the directors came up to me and said, "You're different.
Huh.
People don't like different."
Yeah. Yeah.
So that actually stuck with me.
I'm sorry. I hate that for you.
But I guess, one of the interesting things, I think a lot of folks who are round pegs, I guess it's a round peg. I don't see too many square pegs, or maybe it's a square peg fitting a round hole. I can't remember which, but they find that they're swimming upstream many times, right? Because you've got the overriding culture.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people who are feeling very square peggy or round peggy, depending on the situation? What keeps them going, because they're in this whole sea of people that are swimming one direction?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bruce. And I call it, we're in the era of disruption. And so what's beautiful about being different right now is different is good. And if you're not going to disrupt and rethink everything about your work, who you hire, of course, the type of person you hire, how you work, when you work, the processes surrounding work, everything is about disruption. So different is finally good. And it is all about reframing it. I put all of my students and my leaders through an exercise called Owning Your Story. And you go through this exercise really for you to make sure that you are accepting whatever differences you think or maybe cause you to be self-conscious. Once you own those, I'll give you an example. I had this incredible student at Loyola, an undergraduate, who got up, because I make all my students do this, and he got up at the auditorium and he said, my story is one that I have not ever shared in public before. He said, I grew up in Honduras, very, very poor family, poor community. In fact, we were so poor, my grandma lived with us, but not just lived with us. I shared a bedroom with her. I didn't just share a bedroom with her. We shared a bed. I didn't tell anybody that forever because I was so self-conscious. But this year, my grandmother died. And I wouldn't trade those years for anything because I realized it made me who I am today. And I still get chills when I tell the story, thinking back to it's owning those parts of you that you might have thought were different, but it's what makes you different. And that's really good, right? It's owning every part of yourself.
But it's not only when you own it, it's not, for me, only about owning it, but you're also controlling the narrative. And that was something that Dee Dee Myers at a conference told me, because I, as we've discussed many times, I went through domestic violence. And for years, that was my personal shame. And by my discussing it, I controlled the narrative rather than someone else. And it removed it off the table that there was no longer the stigma. I talked about it. No one held this over my head anymore. I didn't have to be afraid of it. But most importantly, I told my own story rather than someone else outing it and telling my story for me. And I have to think, I mean, it's Dee Dee Myers, the former White House press secretary, is the one that told me I have to control the narrative. And I think that's really important about whatever topic it is.
I love that. I love how you articulated that, Janice. Yeah, so once I had this big eureka and thought, oh gosh, I have to write a book, I waited until I had a sabbatical to start working on it. And then I realized, as a trained researcher, I didn't want to just write about my theory of connection. I wanted to validate it, kind of like how Ruth did in her book. I wanted to go and find beautiful stories of connection at the high executive level around the world. So I ended up interviewing 18 chiefs from around the world. And one of them is Kenneth Polite. And it's very similar, Janice, to what you were saying. He grew up so poor in New Orleans, and because of scholarships was able to take bus after bus after bus, and then the streetcar down the fanciest road, uptown New Orleans, St. Charles Avenue, to go to his high school. And he was the first African-American valedictorian, first African-American student body president, went to Harvard, Georgetown Law School, U.S. attorney. He's now the head of the criminal division in the U.S. Justice Department. Why am I telling you this? Because he feels that by owning his narrative, that's exactly right. Nobody was, I don't want to say nobody, but very few people were judging as much or talking behind his back, because he said, I was born to teenage parents. I lived in the projects. Every day on the way to school, I went from the poorest neighborhood to the richest neighborhood. I'm good with that. That's what makes me me. And I want to make an impact in the world.
So you don't hide it, you own it.
Totally.
I love it.
Yeah, the other thing that I've learned is you really have to believe in your vision when you don't think exactly like everyone else. And you need to be observant, and you need to surround yourself with nourishing people that don't do exactly what you do, but are complementary to what you do, and then be observant as to what they do very well, and to see how that can elevate them and everyone else. So a lot of it is, really, and looking around at the world and seeing where you fit that might be a little different place, so that you're not replicating what everybody else is doing. That really helps make you unique.
Yeah, it's finding your tribe too. And again, that's how Ruth and I bonded. We found our tribe. And although we're a little bit different, we support each other so much. And you have that, you have somebody who has your back, and it's just a beautiful thing. And I do call Ruth out. I will say, you're doing too much. You need somebody who gets you, who's going to, ask you those questions and have your back, for sure. But yeah, surround yourself with diversity, but also like-minded people who support you.
But I think part of the interesting part was it's great to surround yourself with people who are different, but there's also some sort of a common thread that unites you so that you have that common language. So um, for Michelle and I, it was two academics in this group that doesn't have too many academics. And there's a certain vernacular that we use. There's certain stressors that we have that other people just didn't understand. You know, they were working from home. We were going into work. It was very, very different. And I think that's what bonded us originally. So, Michelle, you talk about in the book that connection with yourself requires authenticity, which we just spoke about. And then let's talk about a little bit about the connection with your team, which requires compassion.
Passion.
And boy, do we need that now.
Oh, that's what I was just about to say, Ruth, is in this new crazy world of work, which we're all finding ourselves. One of the things that we've been talking about is give up perfection, right? You can't wear a mask of perfection. And that's never been more true than right now. You can't act like there's this huge line between professional and personal because we're all in it together. We see dogs and babies and unrenovated kitchen, and I'm in my daughter's bonus room, and you just have to accept all of this, right? So first it's giving up the mask of perfection, and then the second thing in order to show compassion is you have to be, as a leader, you have to be intentional. And on all of these Zoom calls, so whether you're doing Zoom or Teams or whether you're in person, we have been disconnected the entire world for so long that you have to be intentional and try to begin with some sort of way to connect the group together, whether it's just a question like, okay, I want to hear what's the best advice that you've ever received. Go. And then get to the agenda. So I was fortunate enough when we were all on lockdown to be hired to do some pulse checks throughout the companies where I was coaching. And I asked, what are your leaders doing that's really working? And what are some of your leaders doing that's not working? And the common theme was the leaders who are really motivating me during this incredibly stressful time are the leaders who show compassion that this is really hard. It's stressful. They recognize and say hi to the baby that's running across the room and not ignoring it and not making me feel bad that I'm not professional today because my toddlers are running around. And it's the leaders who really say, you know what? I care about you as a human. We will get to the results, right? But how are you doing, really?
Yeah.
And then those employees would have moved heaven and earth for these leaders. But unfortunately, a lot of the leaders just wanted to pretend it was business as normal. And they'd hop on the Zooms and they'd say, did you hit your goals? I want to see your spreadsheet. What are you doing next? And ignoring the giant elephant surrounding us, right?
So true. So true. And I think you're right. I think a lot of leaders miss that, but also they don't really know that. And there was a piece of empathy that was really, really missing. How to have those connections between people. Now, Bruce, Janice, Susie, and I, and Debbie, and many others were part of this other group, Renaissance Weekend. We have these Saturday night calls that one of our regular guests, Dr. Susan Bernstone, started very early on in the pandemic. And she basically said, I'm sick and tired of being stuck at home. I'm opening a Zoom room. Anybody who wants to join can join. Well, that started every Saturday night since April 2020, and it hasn't stopped since. It's been continuous. And at the very beginning, everyone was dressed nicely, business casual. We did our hair and makeup. We even got a tutorial how to look fabulous on Zoom. I mean, we went all out. I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months into it, people were just tired of that. And people then were coming in sweats. And I knew that we hit an acceptance point when one of the regulars from those Saturday night group calls came down with COVID. And she joined the Saturday night Zoom from her bed in her pajamas. And that's when I knew that we had reached a level of comfort and acceptance that you come as you are. And I think the entire vibe of that group changed. Nobody dresses up anymore. People come as they are. You want to come in an hour late, you come an hour late. You want to come early, you come early. You want to be a night owl, you be a night owl. Everyone does their thing, and it's 100% accepted. And what has come out of that is whenever anyone is going through some sort of a hard time, they're sick, they need surgery, they, whatever it is, everybody gets together and does something to be supportive of the person who needs help. That would not have happened
Yeah.
prior to these weekly Zoom calls where we got to know each other at such an intimate level. I mean, literally somebody was in their pajamas from their bed. These are super professionals who were all dressed up at the beginning. So I found that to be a shift and an acceptance, and really that brought that authenticity and that connection to a new level.
Yeah, well, you experienced the seismic shift. You went through it. And it's funny, I'm so glad you brought that up because my daughter is sick in the next room. And I went
Oh,
running out
sorry.
right before this podcast because she wanted chicken noodle soup and mac and cheese. And so I went running to the store, and it's pouring down rain. And if anybody's been to New Orleans, it's always 100% humidity, whether it's raining or not.
That's right.
And so I'm running back. And my hair can get really.
Your hair always looks gorgeous, Michelle.
Big.
So I don't know what you're
So-
talking about.
But I was thinking about a shirt that I want to have made is just embrace the frizz. Because I think the
I
frizz,
would buy that.
I totally, because I appreciate the compliment, but I didn't do anything because I thought, well, this whole podcast for me and the message I'm trying to impart is give up perfection. So if I run in right before the podcast and have my hair meticulously coiffed, that goes against everything I'm trying to do. So embrace the frizz.
Honey, why do you think the hair is pulled back today?
It's okay. It's thank gosh, we're moving towards much more informal, like you just described, Ruth. It's just refreshing.
Yeah, that's so true. Now, I'm curious, Bruce, you're one of the night owls, and Susie, and Janice, you're on it too. What I described on Saturday night.
Not night owls. No, I'm not in the night
You're not
owl.
a night owl. You're an early. I log off by 10 o'clock. But
There's this whole application procedure that you have to go through to become a night owl. So Janice has completed some of the forms, but not all of them.
did you guys feel that same connection with the Saturday night group, or am I totally imagining that? Is that my own personal experience?
I think it took a little while for people to get to know one another. But as soon as people started being vulnerable and the first person was a little, could have used our help, I think that really brought us together in a different level of way. It's been amazing. We've gone way beyond friendships. We're family now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think Susie's an example. I mean, she's a super well-known photographer, and that's sort of the initial line you see, but I remember just getting to know not only the depth of what photography can do, and all the things that she does with it, but also her photoing stuff, which is really changing how people think about so many different things. And then I've learned so much in terms of photography. I mean, it's not just taking pictures. You really have to really understand what's happening in a certain moment, understand the people that you're taking pictures of. Of course, I'm saying this, and Susie's the one who's the expert, but that's an example of you wouldn't know that in the surface. You actually have to get to know the person. Even though the person's super accomplished, there's still so much depth behind the person. And that's been terrific. Really getting to know everyone, Susie, Janice, everyone else.
On a much deeper level. Yeah, I think you all brought up the word friends. We became friends. And, a lot of organizations I work with, they have the employee engagement survey, and it's the Gallup one. And all the employees hate the question which asks, do you have a best friend at work? And as a matter of fact, Ruth, Morag Barrett, one of our colleagues, just wrote a book to address that. And I think that that's going to be a little bit easier now for people to understand how important it is to have friends at work, and how much of an effort we want to make. We've got to know each other at a deeper level. That's
Love
why
it.
I focus all on connection. And I know connection can be such a nebulous concept. And so I've got a bunch of strategies in my book. Here's what you can do to meaningfully connect at the self level, at the team level, at the organizational level, because it is about meaningful connection.
It's all about that. And I want to get to those strategies in a moment, but we didn't even get to the third part, which is the alignment. Connecting to the organization, you need alignment. Can you touch on that?
I've got a good story for you. So one of the leaders that I interviewed for my book, Jim Mora Sr. was the head coach of the New Orleans Saints football team. This was the son, or is the son, who I interviewed, who's more my age, and he was an assistant for the New Orleans Saints. And then he went on to become head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, and then head coach at UCLA. And then he just now, I think 2 weeks ago, became head coach of the University of Connecticut up near you all. Really interesting guy. So I'm interviewing him because I didn't know him. Somebody said, "Oh, you're writing a book on connection. You got to interview Jim Mora." So I'm going through these levels like we've been talking about. And I said, "Jim, do you believe in the theory of connection?" And he said, "Believe in it?" He said, "Disconnected leaders fail." And
Yes.
boy, do I have an example for you. He said, "I was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons." He said, "I'm from Seattle. So we had a weekend without a home game or away games. We were playing Monday Night Football. So I was back in Seattle. I was on a radio show. It was hosted by my former college roommate, best buddy, and we were having a blast, cutting up, joking. It was so much fun. At the very end, he asked me, "Jim, if the University of Washington head coach position came available, would you take it?" He said, "Heck yeah, that's my dream job." He said by the time the plane touched down in Atlanta, the owners were on the telephone. He was fired. And he had to go back Monday Night Football in front of 85,000 fans. He said they had effigies of him. And his big lesson, and he was able to rebound, obviously, thank goodness. And he went on to coach Seattle and UCLA and now UConn. But he said, "Michelle, in that moment, I had completely lost connection with the organization. And I had let ego take over, and it was all about me. And even though I was joking, and I wish to goodness I could have communicated better that I really was joking. It's a joke. I love being the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons." So connection with your organization is making sure that you are representing your brand and that there's no cognitive dissonance. So some of the other leaders that I interviewed, one of them in particular, David Calicod, who is a CEO of a hospital, he had been working for profit hospitals, and he was kind of the turnaround guy. And he ended up, and it really made him uncomfortable because he was leading all these people that he knew were about to be fired. And he was in an airplane on 9/11 when they were told that they had to land immediately. And he said it was all of a sudden on a 737 being like in a jet airplane, not a jet airplane, a fighter airplane, and they banked and immediately landed at the airport that was closest to them. And as soon as he got off of that airplane and realized what had happened in the world, he immediately quit. And he said, "I cannot be that person. This does not align with my value system." And then he went and worked for nonprofit organizations. So that's what I mean is your alignment with your organization as a high level leader. You have to have that alignment, because that dissonance of I'm not representing the brand well, or the brand doesn't represent me, I can't motivate everybody to go in that direction because I don't believe in it. That's huge. I mean, you are a representation of the company and its strategic plan.
Whoa. So I'm wondering, do you think that's what's happening right now with,
Yes.
our new reality?
You mean the Great Resignation or the Great
Yeah.
Realization or reevaluation? Yeah, people are saying, "Whoa, I'm not crazy about this company either," for a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe the company doesn't do a good job of appreciating them, and that's what we're seeing. At least that's what all the employees are saying. "I want to work for a company where I'm seen, I'm heard, I'm valued, and I'm appreciated." And I don't feel very good in this position. And now I can work anywhere or out of my home for any company. So I'm going to switch. So yeah, that is absolutely what's happening.
Wow. Wow. All right, Michelle, in the seismic shift in leadership, you talk about some strategies that we can implement. Are you able to share some with us?
I would love to. Absolutely. So under connection with self, we already talked about owning your story. And like I said, it's a part, that process is for you to make sure that you're not self-conscious about pieces of yourself. So I had to go through that process when I had my identity crisis and realized I needed to write this book because I had grown up trying to fit in so much. I wouldn't talk about my upbringing or myself to people because I was so self-conscious. People would ask me, does your dad work for the CIA? What are you running from? Why did you move? Like, where are you from? And I would say, well, I was born in DC. Oh, okay. But I lived there for 3 years. Well, where are you from? And I was so uncomfortable that I ended up putting up a wall.
Yeah.
And I just didn't talk about myself, right? For a long time until I owned my story and figured out, wait a second, I can tell people, you know what? I was a corporate brat. I moved around every 2 years, went to 4 different high schools. It was really an adventure. So I'm not really from anywhere, but I was born in DC. I had to work on that story to be comfortable with telling it. So that's the first part.
Wow.
And then the second part of that connection with self is giving up perfection, which we've talked about, right? Throwing it out the window. Perfection doesn't exist and
Yep.
perfection does not work. So
Yep.
making sure you take off whatever mask that you've had on. And number 3, a part of that section is owning your style. Do you remember I said it didn't occur to me that this could be successful in the College of Business?
Yes.
You know, because I'd been told my whole life, like, whoa, tone it down. You've got way too much energy. You know?
I wish I had a professor like you in business school.
I just was so uncomfortable with that, right? But it wasn't, as we talked about, until I truly understood through taking lots of assessments from the Myers-Briggs to I developed on my first sabbatical an assessment of communication style called the Communication Preference Profile. And I learned that I'm a high people, high action communicator. So I'm high
Shocking.
people. I love finding commonality and connecting. I love that. And then I want to accomplish boom, boom, boom. And the more you take those assessments and understand your style, then you can make sure that you're owning your style, capitalizing on your strengths, and knowing your blind spots so that you can create a team that complements you. So those are the 3 sections of connection with yourself, the three strategies that you're looking for. And then with connection with your team, through all of the interviews, we learned first, you have to show care and compassion to the whole person and not just focus on results. Number 2, as a leader, particularly as a new leader, you have to listen first. Say the first 6 months as a new leader, just create a task force, go around and have conversations. Don't talk, don't direct, listen. And then you'll get all the information you'll need to make any necessary changes. And
So
that's
hard for people.
hard. That's hard.
They just want to come in with a broom and just, start cleaning up.
Yep, that's exactly
do
right.
that.
And then the third characteristic or strategy in connection with your team is acting as a servant leader. So if you can communicate with an organizational chart that I know traditionally I'm up here as the CEO, but the way that I'm going to lead, which is a part of the seismic shift, I'm going to lead from down here. And I'm going to serve you all, and I'm going to build you up and support you and make sure you have what you need. And I get the barriers out of your way. So it's a different, again, it's leaving that command and control in the past and making it much more about the employee. The employees have so much power these days.
That's so true. Michelle, we had a guest a while ago who's also in my book, Hondo Geertz, who's the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And he said the same thing. He turns the org chart upside down so that the lowest level, well, they're not officers. The lowest level people in the Navy are the ones he serves first.
I love that. The front line. So in the hospital.
Front line. Yeah. So he says he just shifts the hierarchy upside down. It's quite fascinating, actually.
It's fascinating, and it works. And then when you get to the connection with the organization, I learned something from Warner Thomas, who's the CEO of Auctioner system, the whole health system, and they're just growing and blowing. And he said, I said, how do you successfully connect with Ochsner, with the organization? He said, I tell all of my leaders, you must own your calendars. If your calendars own you, you're not going to be an effective leader. And so I have a whole chapter on that because I don't think that's talked about enough. And it really goes back to organization, time management, knowing who your important stakeholders are, and really scheduling your time and your calendar so that you can be successful. He even says, Michelle, when you're coaching, make sure, he goes, I'm paying those high level leaders that you're coaching for their brains. And if they're not embedding time to strategically think, that's not good.
Yeah.
I don't want them just reacting. I want them to own their calendars.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because the best authors who I know include information on time management in their books because it's so critical and so overlooked. And it's so interesting to me that so many people block off time for deep thinking on their calendar. And I said, well, how do you just do that in the crevices of your time? How do you just reflect on command? I'm an extrovert. I can't reflect on command. That it just doesn't work. And I think people just don't understand what their most focused hours are and they don't know how to leverage that time. So if I am a morning person, I need to do my deep thinking in the morning, not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock in the afternoon is for passive tasks. And I think most people don't understand that. So I'm so excited that you are talking about time management and the seismic shift in leadership.
Absolutely.
Fabulous.
So yeah, we just frame it as owning your calendar, and it's an entire chapter. As a matter of fact, one of my clients on Friday, she texted me, she said, you'd be so proud of me, Michelle. She said, I'm taking the entire day. It's a work day and I have no meetings, anything. And I just have pads and pads of paper and I'm just going to reflect and strategize and envision and ideate and all of the things that I never have time doing. As a matter of fact, I did this really cool event with Qualcomm and we blew everything up. I mean, it was all disruption. And one of the things they decided at the end of the event, the retreat, was no meetings on Fridays. Please let us think and do and reflect. And how cool that that's just one of the takeaways that is absolutely going to affect them in a positive way. So we had already talked about, so again, the connection with the organization, we had already talked about alignment, and that's making sure that your values are aligned with the company values, or else it's going to catch up with you, and that cognitive dissonance is going to take over at some point. And then the second strategy is own your calendar. And then the third strategy that I learned about from all of these executives was to create a positive culture. And Todd Graves is a wonderful example of that. He started Raising Cane's Chicken. I don't think that you all have it up there. I'm trying to think of it. It's a chicken finger place. I'm trying to think of what would be the equivalent to you. But it started as a chicken finger fast food right out of the gates of LSU. And now he's global. And boy, is he global. And he believes that in his entire success is because he centered the whole organization around a motto, one love. And he looked around because he, was the owner of this little chicken finger joint. And he wanted to make it fun. And he looked around, and McDonald's, Burger King, whatever, name your other fast food, the employees were not having fun. They had polyester shirts, really embarrassing clothes, and he made it cool and fun. He made this one love motto come to life. And he's one of the most admired CEOs right now. And Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers is one of the best places to work.
Wow. All right, Bruce, I need to hear your thoughts on this. This is not quite your world, is it?
Well, I was about to say, I think one principle of connecting is actually to know people's names. And I remember I worked, I guess under someone, and after a period of time, he didn't even know my name. So,
and you've got
my name is not
easy
too difficult to remember. So,
yeah.
So that's I encountered a lot of that, and obviously, when that happens, you're not going to feel very connected.
You're right. That's Dale Carnegie's main thing, is that people love hearing the sound of their own names. So just keep repeating it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And, if there's anyone who knows how to make connections, Janice, you're the queen of connections. You connect with people, you could take these different ideas and really figure out how to, a way that it connects with them, and you connect with those people on a very personal level. What's your magic sauce?
Yeah, it's very hard, when you're trying to convince people to add hearing access. It's very hard if you can't understand what the connection is to them. And so I remember when I was trying to fix captions on television because of poor quality spelling, I realized one way I could connect was contacting Bob Wright, the former chairman of NBC, because he had a grandson who was autistic. And I knew this would resonate with him because he would understand why proper spelling was so important to children who are growing up and learning, especially when they have a hearing loss. And he did. And that's why today, it from NBC fixing caption standards, we now have proper spelling on captions on recorded content. But it was because it resonated with him. And I think I always say, and it's really funny because sometimes when you're looking for connections, it's not the obvious. People think you do these Google searches. I was reading an article in Town and Country at Bergdorf Goodman getting my hair done. And, when you're reading something like that, those those articles, that you could find those little snippets, and it's about remembering them and keeping a list. And you never know where you're going to find that information. It's not just the obvious places. Sometimes it's just reading a magazine.
And you know what? And Michelle and I connected because we were two academics just trying to stand out in our own way and just be our authentic selves, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
Frizzy hair and all.
It's just embracing, right? And we related to each other. You're right, because we're both just trying to do it all and all well, but all authentically. But I'm so glad y'all both mentioned Dale Carnegie and finding commonality, as Janice was referring to. I wrote a section in the book, and I just had this vivid memory of being on my dad's gold shag carpeting floor of his home office and seeing how to win friends and influence people. And I was maybe 9 and taking it off the shelf and opening up. And there was a story about Dale Carnegie's dog named Tippy. And Dale had one of those eureka moments because he realized what Tippy was so good at is making you feel good. It was not about Tippy. It was about the person, right?
Yeah.
And I realized at the time, since I was moving around, I'd already learned that if I went to a new city and just talked about my former city, oh, you should have seen their traditions, their high school. It's a much prettier place. My friends were better. And nobody wants to hear about that. They want to hear about themselves. So you, as Janice was saying, you find connection and commonality with that person. You don't make it about you. And I also think that goes back to the command and control. When I was mentored just to lecture all the time, and I was trying to emulate these people who it was all about themselves. They just told story after story about themselves, and they were loved and beloved, right? But when I did it, it didn't really work. I had to change it because I wasn't making a connection with them. And then I made it all about the students, not about me. This is not about me. I might have the information and be a trained expert in the field, but it's about them.
And we do a lot of collaborating and partnering with other organizations. And it usually happens first out of instinct, where I see an organization that is doing interesting things, but it's really about a meeting of the minds and the way that we might help one another together. 1 and 1 makes 3. We're doing something now with one of our partners, and it's somebody I've known over 10 years. And over time, we've evolved in I come up with an idea, and they would come up with an idea, and each one would layer on the others to bring something that is really original and powerful. Right now, we're doing a workshop. We decided to do it virtually, where it's usually, we usually go to Kigali or Calcutta to do this. We decided to do it virtually. And long story short, we're doing it. It's being taught in 9 languages around the world and translated into 7. And it's just working on each of our strengths, and my team working with their team. and there's 72 students that are going to benefit just because of that. But it all comes from a way of thinking. We're all headed the same direction, and how can we each bring our strengths?
Love it. Love it.
I think one of the reasons why Janice is, connects with people so readily is she oozes like authenticity and really is super capable, and is really interested in solving problems. So I think people can sense that. Whereas there's some people who are, they sort of will just talk about random things or not really, so I think that's what really helps, because we joke that one of these days Janice should have a show, how to do anything.
Oh, yes.
And then just you bring a problem to Janice and then she solves it for you. So yeah, but I think you can sense that when people are like that, when they actually are interested in solving problems and actually getting things done, as opposed to kind of playing politics or what have you.
Yeah, and she does it. She doesn't just talk about it.
Oh, yes. We call that WWJD. What would Janice do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Michelle.
you guys are too funny. You guys are just seriously too funny.
Michelle, The Seismic Shift in Leadership. This is a brilliant book. Tell everyone where they can find it.
Yeah, it's now available wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, it's out there. You can go to my website, Michelle K. Johnston, www.michellekjohnston.com, and just type in Michelle Johnston or Seismic Shift or whatever you want, Michelle Johnson Loyola, you'll see it. But it was super exciting this weekend when all of these advanced author copies, 200 of them, arrived to my house. And I just had like tears of joy. Like, it's real.
It's
Finally.
real.
It's real. I know. It's exciting. Yeah.
Congratulations on the book. And for those of you getting the book, it's a very, very big deal for authors. If you can leave a review from wherever you bought the book, it actually helps other people find the book and really spread the word, what Michelle has worked for years on. So The Seismic Shift in Leadership, wherever you love buying books. All of us here, you'll see all of our information in the comments section, as well as that for Michelle. On behalf of all of us, thank you very, very much, Michelle. And we will see everyone next week. Thank you to the Mentor Project, and thank you to Dr. Debbie Heiser for always making us look fabulous. See you next week, everyone.
Thank you so much. This was great.